And here is the Writer's Almanac for Friday, July the 19th, 2019. On this day in 1954, the first part of the Lord of the Rings trilogy came out, The Fellowship of the Ring, a sequel to J.R.R. Tolkien's The Hobbit, which had come out in 1937. He wrote The Hobbit for his own amusement, didn't expect it to sell well, the story of Bilbo Baggins, a human-like creature with hairy feet who goes on an adventure through Middle-earth and comes back with a magical ring. Tolkien once wrote, "I am in fact a hobbit in all but size. I like gardens, trees, and unmechanized farmlands. I smoke a pipe, like good plain food, detest French cooking. I am fond of mushrooms, have a very simple sense of humor, go to bed late, and get up late. I do not travel much." The Hobbit sold pretty well, and the publisher asked for a sequel, and Tolkien decided the new book would be about Bilbo's nephew Frodo and about the magical ring. He spent 17 years working on The Lord of the Rings, writing in his spare time, usually at night, sitting by the stove in the study in his house. He was well into the first draft by the time World War II broke out in 1939. He had not intended to write an allegory, but once the war began, he started to draw parallels between the war and the events in his novel. The book became more and more complicated as Tolkien went along. It took much longer than he had planned. He went through long stretches where he did not write anything. He had to make sure the details were right, the geography, the language, the mythology of Middle-earth. He made elaborate charts. And finally, in the fall of 1949, he finished The Lord of the Rings, typing the final copy himself, sitting on a bed in his attic, the typewriter on his lap, tapping it out with 2 fingers. It turned out to be more than 500,000 words long. And the first volume came out on this day in 1954. The Seneca Falls Convention, the first convention for women's rights, began on this date in 1848 at the Wesleyan Chapel in Seneca Falls, New York. And it's the birthday of Edgar Degas, born in Paris, 1834, best known for his paintings of ballet dancers, who, after he became completely blind in one eye and nearly blind in the other, began to work in sculpture, which he called a blind man's art. It was on this date in 1799, French soldiers in Napoleon's army discovered the Rosetta Stone in a port town on Egypt's Mediterranean coast. It was a slab of rock about 4 feet high, 2.5 feet wide, 11 inches thick, weighed about 1,700 pounds. There was writing on the stone in 3 different scripts: ancient Greek, Demotic, and Egyptian hieroglyphics. 3 texts that they discovered said the same thing. Scholars could understand the ancient Greek, and so from that they were able to figure out the hieroglyphs, which had been a dead language for 2,000 years. The stone has now been in the British Museum for more than 200 years. Here's a poem by George Bilger entitled Hoses. I love the hoses of summer hanging in their green coils from the sides of houses, or slithering through lawns on their way to the cool meditations of sprinklers. I think of my father armed with his scotch and garden hose, probing the dusk with water, the world in flames around him, booze running the show. Still, he liked to walk out after dinner and water the yard, fiddling with the nozzle, misting this, showering that. Sometimes in the hot twilight, my sisters and I would run in our swimsuits through the grass while he followed us with a cold beam of water. And once, when my mother came out to watch, he turned the hose on her, the two of them laughing in a way we'd never heard, a laughter that must have brought them back to the beginning. Hoses by George Bilgier from his collection Imperial, published by University of Pittsburgh Press and used by permission here on the Writer's Almanac. Be well, do good work, and keep in touch.